What she thought was one desperate night would change everything, but not in the way she imagined. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Peninsula Hotel's penthouse suite as Minji stood frozen in the doorway, her wet clothes clinging to her trembling body. She had exactly 3 hours to make a decision that would either save her brother's life or destroy what remained of her dignity. The man standing across the room, silhouetted against Seoul's glittering skyline, was her only option. Kang Jae-hyun, the youngest CEO in South Korea's pharmaceutical empire, known equally for his brilliant mind and his reputation for ruthlessness. Minji's fingers clutched the crumpled hospital bill in her coat pocket. 8 million won for the surgery her brother Tae-min desperately needed. Brain surgery. Emergency. 48 hours maximum before irreversible damage. She had knocked on every door, begged every loan shark in Gangnam, and sold everything she owned. Nothing was enough. Then came the phone call from an unknown number with an offer that made her stomach turn. One night, with Kang Jae-hyun, in exchange for complete payment of all medical expenses. What Minji didn't know was that this wasn't a random transaction. Jae-hyun had been watching her for months, ever since that autumn morning 6 months ago, when she had stumbled into him at Hongdae's morning market, coffee splashing across his expensive suit. While she had frantically apologized and disappeared into the crowd, he had stood motionless, captivated by something he couldn't name. The genuine concern in her eyes. The way she had looked at him like he was human rather than a walking corporation. He had his people find out everything about her. The struggling art student working 3 jobs, the younger brother with a chronic condition, the apartment in Mapo-gu that barely had heat in winter. Jae-hyun turned from the window, his expression unreadable in the dim light. He was taller than Minji remembered from the brief encounter months ago, his features sharp and aristocratic, the kind of face that belonged on billboards rather than in a hotel room making illicit deals. He gestured toward the contract on the glass table between them. Everything legally documented, including a confidentiality clause that would ruin her if she ever spoke about this night. Minji's hands shook as she picked up the pen. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but Tae-min's pale face in that hospital bed haunted her. He was only 17, a genius with numbers who dreamed of studying at KST. She couldn't let him die because of her pride. She signed quickly, before she could change her mind, each stroke of the pen feeling like a piece of her soul being bartered away. What happened next surprised them both. Jae-hyun poured 2 glasses of wine, but didn't approach her. Instead, he sat in the leather chair across the room and asked her a question that made her heart skip. Why art? For the next hour, they talked. She told him about how she used to sketch her mother's face after she died, trying to preserve every detail before memory faded. He listened with an intensity that made her uncomfortable, as if cataloging every word, every expression. Jae-hyun revealed nothing about himself except his hands. She noticed the tremor in his fingers when he refilled her glass, the way he flexed them as if trying to control something invisible. What Minji couldn't see was the war raging inside him. He had orchestrated this meeting not for the reasons his assistant had implied to her, but because he needed to be near her, to understand why she occupied every corner of his mind. The money for Tae-min's surgery had already been anonymously deposited into the hospital's account 3 days ago. This night was never about payment. It was about proximity to someone who made him feel human for the first time in a decade. As the night deepened, Jae-hyun made a decision that would haunt him. He couldn't go through with it. Not like this. Not built on a lie that would make her hate him forever. He told her to take the bedroom while he would sleep on the couch. Minji stared at him in confusion, then suspicion, then something close to gratitude. She disappeared into the bedroom, and Jae-hyun sat alone in the darkness, wondering if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Morning arrived with weak sunlight filtering through Seoul's perpetual haze. Minji woke disoriented, finding a note on the nightstand written in elegant Hangul. Your brother's surgery is scheduled for this afternoon. Everything has been arranged. The contract is void. You owe me nothing. She ran to the living room, but Jae-hyun was gone. The contract lay torn into precise pieces on the table, and beside it, a black credit card with a note. For anything else Taemin needs, no strings, just live well. Taemin's surgery was successful. The neurosurgeon was one of the best in Asia, flown in specifically for the operation. Details Minji only learned later when she tried to thank the hospital staff. Someone had pulled significant strings, and she knew exactly who. She tried to find Jae-hyun for weeks, but Kang Corporation's headquarters was a fortress, and the CEO was apparently unreachable to random citizens who showed up demanding meetings. 3 months passed. Minji returned to her life, her art classes at Hongik University, her part-time job at a gallery in Samcheongdong, her evenings caring for Taemin through his recovery. She tried to forget that night, but Seoul had a way of making the city feel small. She saw Jae-hyun's face on magazine covers at convenience stores, on news reports about Kang Corporation's latest pharmaceutical breakthrough, even on a billboard in Gangnam announcing some charity initiative. What Minji didn't know was that Jae-hyun was unraveling. He had built his life on control and calculated decisions, but she had disrupted everything. He found himself driving past Hongik University at hours when he knew her classes ended. He anonymously purchased 3 of her paintings from the small gallery where she worked, hanging them in his private office where no one else could see. His secretary noticed his distraction during board meetings, the way he stared out windows toward neighborhoods he had no reason to care about. The collision of their worlds happened on a winter evening at the Seoul Museum of Art. Minji's professor had secured her a spot in a group exhibition for emerging artists, her first real showcase. She stood nervously beside her painting, a large abstract piece called Exchange, exploring themes of sacrifice and human worth. She didn't notice Jae-hyun enter the gallery, didn't see how he stopped breathing when he saw her work, recognizing immediately what it depicted, that night, translated into color and texture. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Minji's first instinct was to run, but something in his expression held her in place. He approached slowly, hands in the pockets of his wool coat, looking more uncertain than any CEO should ever appear. They stood in front of her painting together, neither speaking, while Seoul's art elite mingled around them, oblivious to the tension crackling between 2 people who barely knew each other, but somehow understood everything. Jae-hyun broke the silence first, asking if she would have coffee with him. Not as a transaction, not as a creditor and debtor, but as 2 people who had unfinished business. Minji agreed, and they left the gallery together, walking through Bukchon Hanak village as snow began to fall, their breath visible in the cold air. Over coffee at a small shop tucked away from tourist paths, Jae-hyun did something he had never done with anyone. He told the truth. He explained how that morning at Hongdae Market had changed him, how he had spent months trying to rationalize his obsession with a stranger, how that night at the hotel was supposed to give him closure, but instead made everything worse. Minji listened with a mixture of disbelief and something else she couldn't name. Not quite anger, not quite forgiveness, something complicated and raw between them. She asked him why he hadn't just approached her normally, why the elaborate deception. Jae-hyun's answer was simple and devastating. Because men like me don't believe we deserve simple things. We take what we want, and we pay for it. I didn't know how to just ask. The revelation hung between them like the snow now falling harder outside the coffee shop window. Minji should have been furious, should have thrown her coffee in his face and walked away. But she saw something in his eyes that she recognized from her own mirror. Loneliness so profound it had carved out spaces where normal human connection should exist. He had grown up in a chaebol family where love was conditional and strategic, where every relationship was a transaction. He had learned to protect himself by controlling everything, never realizing he was building a prison. They talked until the coffee shop owner politely informed them he was closing. They walked through Bukchon's snowy alleys, their conversation flowing from heavy confessions to lighter topics, his secret love of old Korean films, her dream of having her own exhibition someday. their shared hatred of seafood despite living in a country that loved it. Seoul transformed around them into something magical, the city lights reflecting off fresh snow, creating a world that existed just for them. But reality waited in the shadows. As they approached the main street, a black sedan pulled up sharply beside them. Jae-hyun's expression changed immediately, his body language shifting into something cold and defensive. His father's secretary emerged, informing him that Chairman Kang demanded his immediate presence for an emergency board meeting regarding the upcoming merger with a Japanese pharmaceutical company. The secretary's eyes flickered dismissively over Minji before returning to Jae-hyun with barely concealed urgency. Jae-hyun hesitated, torn between the life he had always known and something new and terrifying standing beside him in the snow. Minji made the decision for him, telling him to go, that she understood. She walked away before he could respond, disappearing into Anguk Station's crowded entrance, leaving him standing alone on the sidewalk with a choice to make. 3 weeks of silence followed. Minji threw herself into her art, creating piece after piece that her professor called startlingly raw, without understanding what fueled them. Tae-min, now recovered and back at school, noticed his sister's distraction, but wisely said nothing. Minji convinced herself she had dodged a bullet, that involvement with someone like Kang Jae-hyun would have only brought complications she didn't need. The news broke on a Tuesday morning. Kang Corporation's merger with Tanaka Pharmaceuticals was officially announced, and with it came engagement news. Kang Jae-hyun was to marry Tanaka Yumi, the daughter of the Japanese company's chairman. The business sections praised the strategic alliance. The entertainment section speculated about the wedding that would unite two of Asia's most powerful pharmaceutical dynasties. Minji saw the headlines at the convenience store where she bought her morning coffee. She felt nothing at first, then a sharp pain that surprised her with its intensity. She had no claim on him, no right to feel betrayed, but the hurt was real and visceral. She threw herself into preparations for her solo exhibition. Her professor had been so impressed with her recent work that he had secured her a small gallery space in Samcheong-dong for a month-long show. What Minji didn't know was that Jae-hyun was being systematically destroyed by his father's ultimatum: marry Tanaka Yumi and secure the merger, or watch Kang Corporation be dismantled piece by piece through hostile takeover attempts orchestrated by rival chaebols. His father had made it clear, personal feelings were irrelevant. The company his grandfather built, that employed 15,000 people, took precedence over everything else. Jae-hyun agreed to the engagement with one condition: a 6-month waiting period before the wedding. His father agreed, assuming his son needed time to adjust to arranged marriage. But Jae-hyun had other plans. He worked 18-hour days restructuring Kang Corporation's ownership and management, quietly transferring power away from his father's generation, building alliances with progressive board members who believed in merit over traditional hierarchy. The opening night of Minji's exhibition arrived during Seoul's cherry blossom season. The small gallery overflowed with visitors, her paintings creating immersive experiences of color and emotion that drew viewers into worlds of sacrifice, connection, and hope. Critics praised her bold use of negative space, the way she made emptiness feel like a presence rather than an absence. Jae-hyun appeared just before closing, when most guests had left. He moved through the exhibition slowly, studying each piece, and Minji watched him from across the room with her heart hammering. He stopped in front of the final painting, a diptych titled Before and After, that showed a figure transforming from shadow into light, but ambiguous about whether the transformation was ascension or dissolution. He turned to find her watching him. They stood separated by 20 feet of polished gallery floor, neither moving, both afraid that crossing that distance would shatter whatever fragile thing existed between them. Jae-hyun spoke first, his voice carrying in the empty space. "I broke off the engagement this morning." Minji's breath caught. He continued, explaining how he had spent 3 months restructuring everything, how he had outmaneuvered his father's attempts to control him, how he had chosen a different path, one that meant potentially losing everything his family had built, but gaining the possibility of building something real for himself. He had chosen her. Or rather, he had chosen the chance to see where this impossible thing between them might lead, if given honest foundation. The confession should have been romantic, but Minji's response surprised them both. She was angry, furious that he thought grand gestures and corporate maneuvering were the same as actually showing up, actually being present. She told him she didn't need him to blow up his life for her, didn't need to be the reason he rebelled against his father. What she needed was someone who could be consistently there, who could handle the small moments and boring days, not just the dramatic declarations. Her honesty cut through Jae-hyun's carefully prepared speech. He realized he had approached this the same way he approached everything, as a problem to solve with strategy and resources. He sat down on the gallery floor, expensive suit and all, and laughed. A real laugh that sounded rusty from disuse. He told her she was absolutely right, that he had no idea how to do normal, but he wanted to learn if she would teach him. Minji sat down beside him, their shoulders not quite touching, looking at her paintings from this new perspective. She asked him what he actually wanted, not what he thought he should want, or what would make the best story. Jae-hyun's answer was simple. To stop being afraid of wanting things that aren't strategic. They sat together as evening deepened into night, gallery lights eventually dimming on automatic timers, talking through possibilities and concerns. Minji made him promise there would be no grand gestures, no dramatic rescues, no playing white knight. If they were going to try this, it had to be real, messy and difficult and uncertain. Jae-hyun agreed, and they made a pact to start over, properly this time, with honesty instead of transactions. Seoul's spring unfolded around them as they navigated something neither had experienced before: actual relationship building. Jae-hyun learned to silence his phone during meals, to show up for simple things like grocery shopping and subway rides. Minji learned to let someone support her without feeling like she owed them, to accept help as partnership rather than debt. They fought about his tendency to solve problems with money, about her stubborn refusal to accept any help, about the fundamental differences in their worlds. But they also discovered unexpected compatibility. Jae-hyun loved listening to her explain art theory while they walked along Cheongye-cheon Stream. Minji discovered she enjoyed hearing about pharmaceutical innovations when Jae-hyun explained them with genuine passion rather than corporate speak. Taemin, protective but perceptive, grudgingly admitted that Jae-hyun seemed less like a robot CEO every time he visited their small apartment. 6 months after that gallery night, Jae-hyun officially stepped down as CEO of Kang Corporation, taking a research director position instead. Work he actually cared about, developing affordable medications for chronic conditions. His father disowned him publicly, a scandal that rocked Seoul's business community. But Jae-hyun found himself sleeping better than he had in years, waking up next to someone who loved him for who he was becoming, rather than what he represented. Minji's career flourished as she gained recognition in Seoul's art scene. She never forgot that night at the Peninsula Hotel, never forgot the desperation that led her there. But she reframed it in her mind. Not as a moment of weakness, but as a catalyst that brought two broken people together who somehow made each other more whole. On a warm autumn evening, exactly 1 year after their honest beginning at the gallery, Jae-hyun proposed at that same Hongdae morning market where they had first collided. No grand gesture, just him on one knee amid the chaos of vendors and morning crowds, offering a simple silver ring and a promise to keep showing up, keep learning, keep choosing her every day. Minji said yes, not because he had saved her brother, or because he represented security, but because she had watched him transform from a man who bought connection into someone who understood love couldn't be transacted. They married quietly at a small hanok in Bukchon village, with only Taemin and a handful of close friends present. No business merger, no strategic alliance, just two people who had found each other in the messy, complicated way that real love often requires, through mistakes and misunderstandings, through honesty that hurt and vulnerability that terrified them both. Seoul continued its relentless pace around them, a city of millions where two people had somehow found each other against impossible odds. What started as one desperate night became a lifetime of mornings, each one a choice to stay, to build something real in a world that often valued appearance over substance. They chose each other, again and again, learning that sometimes the best love stories don't begin with perfection. They begin with two flawed people deciding to be honest about their brokenness and brave enough to heal together.